Our next speaker, Rafael Diez de Medina, is Director of the Department of Statistics of the ILO and has been involved in the negotiations for the SDGs monitoring indicators, which have just been agreed. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you, the organizers. It's a pleasure to be here with you and share. I will try to summarize a bit procedures, but to start with, I think in a transformative agenda, the SDGs, I think it's, and the question that Valeria posed about if this is good for gender, I would say that from the metrics perspective, the statistical perspective, I think we are going to have quite a bigger set of indicators to follow up, and from the gender's perspective, I would say that yes, it's good for gender. I think, at least from the metrics perspective, and this is what I am going to brief you on where we are in this process. Well, as you know, the process started earlier, even before the actual declaration was finished in September last year. So after the open working groups finished their political negotiations, it was very clear that the international statistical system should have a clear understanding and quick reaction, and it would be even an infeasible task to place all the 169 targets into actual metrics and indicators feasible and possible to be released by a universal agenda, which was a major challenge, I would say, for the whole system. This was triggered by the UN, the ECOSOC, in last, I would say, by the end of 2014 already, where they establish or they ask their own advisory body, which is the UN Statistical Commission, which encompasses of all the statistical offices of all countries in the world, to try to start looking at the possible goals and targets, and to start trying to to find adequate metrics and adequate indicators. So no sooner this was finished, this process was started, the UN Statistical Commission, of course, tried to establish an interagency expert group dealing on a subset of countries, member states driven only, not, I would say that in this case, the UN was observer and the agencies were observers. It was driven by the member states. And member states at the different regions elected a set of around five countries. And they established a set of 28 countries, co-chaired by Mexico and the Philippines, where this expert group would guide the process throughout the year, and hopefully throughout afterwards the declaration was done in 2015. No sooner this process was finished, this interagency expert group started to work actively, I would say. It was very, and I would say that if the UN can say that we work as one UN, the need to have this set of indicators make us work as one UN. And I think it's one of the few cases that we see all the system, and even beyond the international system, UN system, but also I would say the international statistical system that is encompassing also of other major stakeholders like the Bretton Woods institutions, the development banks, the regional statistical bodies. So all parties concerned with the statistics in the world were called, civil society actively involved, were called to have these discussions. And of course, these discussions proved to be very hard, very hectic. There were many consultations. The first meeting was in June in New York, in June last year in New York. It was a very kind of, I would say, tense meeting where all the different goals and targets were kind of bargaining towards having more indicators or whatever. But of course, the national statistical offices in the world were very hesitant to accept all kind of indicators, and they wanted to have a guide follow certain procedures, like being very parsimonious. They didn't want a lot of indicators, but of course at least 169 indicators would have to appear. But in the end there was many negotiations. I would cut it very short because it's very tedious, but to come back to now, well, we have this interagency expert group has suggested a set of indicators that was presented to the last UN Statistical Commission last March, only three weeks ago, where there were a lot of tensions also on negotiations again, but it was agreed with some caveats that I will mention. But so the international indicator framework that will encompass around 231 indicators are going to be and are already agreed by the Commission and has gone already to the ECOSOC and the General Assembly for adoption. This will be happening as we speak. So the ECOSOC is being called in the officials list during April, and hopefully we will have the endorsement of the framework by the next session of the UN General Assembly. So this is the process where we are. How we are in the gender perspective, how we are in the indicators. The indicators have different scopes and different degrees of advancement. I would say that at the very outset of the process, the indicators were meant to be forward-looking. But of course, the need to start the monitoring right away and the need to and the pressure to have the indicators available put a lot of tension in these negotiations. And in the end, the indicators, although most of them are already available, the international system has agreed that no sooner a target is mentioning a subset of groups or disaggregation on populations to be covered, or gender is one very important cross-cutting dimension, but we have also disabilities, we have also age, we have a lot of different dimensions. They have agreed it, irrespective of their availability or not, which is a crucial thing. The indicator should reflect that. So this is a big advancement, because although we know of the gaps and the huge challenges that we will have in terms of data production by developing countries, precisely, and even in some cases by developed countries who are not used to compute certain indicators that are more for developing countries. So in this, although we are very aware of these limitations, we know that in the end we are going to move towards having that. So the indicator, even if it is not feasible now or even available, for instance, gender discrimination, gender disaggregation by many of the indicators are not now available at the moment. We are going to work, the international system will have to work towards having these metrics done. So that's my first reaction. Yes, I think we have a good news for gender, because we have a lot of indicators. Not only, of course, the outcome, the goal 5, which is the core is the gender issues, but it's cross-cutting, I would say, all the goals. We have indicators that are mentioning explicitly gender issues. And of course, this is a major challenge, but also a good news for the countries to work with. The indicators, the degree of advancement of the indicators we have to say that, of course, some of the major targets are not properly measured or will not be properly measured now. There is the international system has agreed on having a process of refinement of these indicators. So the indicators, what we are called, where we are mentioning that it's those that are already available, are, I would say, around 60% of the indicators. Then we have some of them that they require some effort from countries to produce, but methodologies are available, and we can expect that in no time we will have them. It's more or less another, I would say, 20%. But then we have a certain percentage of indicators that have to be developed. And in this, there are many related to gender issues, but particularly on not OSDECOR, but in some of the perspectives, especially in Goal 5, we have a lot of methodological advancements that we should go. And when we say we, it's the countries along with the international system. So summing up, I think that the indicator framework will be in place already for this year. And the second thing is that we have a lot of potential activities that the countries will have to achieve to support this at the country level. And I think this process has helped the international system to raise awareness with donors, with the international community, on a very kind of concealed agenda that it was in the past, because the metrics were, in terms of gender, were already taken for granted, and it was not the same. There is a need to work further and to advance on the metrics and the methods, etc. So this will be really a transformative agenda for